Welcome to Royalty Real's Real podcast. Real conversations, real people, real life.
Yo, what's going on, guys? It's your man, Royalty. We're here today, and I'm back with another podcast episode. Today, my guest is Sunny Laprade, a comedian and just an awesome person. I followed her on TikTok about, I want to say 2 weeks ago, and she was posting pieces of her special, and I was just like, this is hilarious. I got to find more, so it's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I saw your special on TikTok. Like I said, I saw it, and I was seeing that you were posting clips of it, which is what I do with my content as well. I post clips of it to get people interested, and then I saw the link to your Instagram, and so I hit you up, and I'm like, I'm surprised that you responded so quickly. But I see that your following is growing so fast. So I'm like, how does it feel to be in this space to release a full special like that and to get the reception that you're getting?
It's so exciting, man. I've been looking forward to this for a while. I've been doing stand-up since 2015. So
wow.
I've been like looking forward to this. And I started when I was in high school, and I knew that like by the time I graduated college, I wanted to have like a full stand-up special. And so I was working towards that the whole 4 years I was in school, and I knew that I was gonna come out with something at the end. And I always knew I was gonna make it, but it's just such a pleasant surprise to have people actually respond to it. I kind of didn't expect anyone to ever see it.
Right. What is your degree in? What'd you go to school for specifically?
I got a degree in humor studies and the comedic arts.
I swear I did not know that was even an option.
Yeah, I went to like a real hippy dippy school. There were like no tests, no grades. They didn't take your SAT scores. And then there's like it has like a design your own major program. So I knew
Okay.
going in that I was like, I want to do stand up while I'm here. And then for your senior year, for your like thesis project, they kind of let you do whatever you wanted. So I worked with an academic committee to produce the special. And so that's also how I graduated college. That's how I passed.
How was that? How was the coursework going into that? Because do you have to do like your basic prereqs and then you go into your field? Like what kind of classes are they teaching?
Yeah, I took a lot of like general, like Psych 101 type stuff. And then it was a lot of like, there's not a super robust academic system for like specifically comedy. So it was a lot of kind of trying to make things work. So I would take a lot of like theater and creative writing and like film. So I knew the like technical stuff of how to produce the video for the special. I had like the performing experience from taking theater class. I had the creative writing experience to write all of my jokes. And then whenever I could, I would take a couple humor theory classes. So I got a bunch of those in during my time there as well.
Do you ever get any practice in on doing jokes on the fly in case you do like get a heckler or anything like that?
Um, I don't like doing crowd work. I try to avoid it whenever I can. And for the most part, like even if I do get heckled, unless I can think of something super funny to say, for the most part, I'm like, it's not worth my time for me to derail my prepared material for something that may or may not work. And if anything, it's just giving the person the attention that they want by heckling.
Right, definitely. I do something. I don't think it's as similar, but it's I do a battle rap, which is you have to be in front of the crowd and everything, and dealing with the heckler is different because you have the opportunity to break off from your verse and say something to them that can impact your performance as well. But it's difficult because you don't want somebody to talk during what you're saying. Like you don't want somebody to interrupt you, and it's just like, oh, don't. The both times I did 3 times, 4 times actually, and I'm like, please don't say anything. And I had one time where there was a lady, you could see it in the video, where she was audibly heckling me from like right outside the camera, but my face was just showing the frustration. And I'm trying to keep composure because this is a composed sport, just like comedy. You have to be composed. And I just kind of like that's probably one of my worst showings on film.
Yeah, I feel that. I think that like there's this big wave right now in like what's trendy of especially on TikTok of like crowd work comics,
Mhm.
right? That's like all people post.
Yeah.
And I think that like that's getting us to a point where like you're gonna go to a comedy club in a couple years and no one's gonna have any prepared material. They're only gonna be like waiting for people to heckle them. But B, like if every clip that people see of you is you like going after a heckler, that encourages the worst type of people to come to your shows.
Yeah.
Like, cause then they're gonna be like, oh, I'm gonna go to this dude's show. I'm gonna heckle while they're on stage. They're gonna respond, post it on TikTok, and then I'll get like a million views. They see it as like you are their ticket to their 15 minutes of fame. And I don't know. That's not
That's
my
terrible.
style.
That is really terrible to come look. You paid a ticket to watch somebody perform for you. Why you wouldn't go to a play and interrupt somebody there? Now, I don't mind certain people that post their content, when they deal with them in a very quick manner and it's obvious like, hey, you shouldn't have messed with that person. But at a certain point, like you said, it's gonna come to a point where you come to a show and they're not gonna have anything prepared and it's just gonna be crowd work and it's just like that's not fun to me.
No, I think that like there are a couple people who do it real well. And I am like, okay, you're allowed. Like that guy Stavros, he kills with crowd work. Like every crowd work clip I see from him, I'm like, that's actually real good. But then there are like a million people who see him doing that really well and are like, oh, that's easy. And they try to do it and it doesn't work
Not,
as well. And I'm
not
like, yeah, man, like you gotta leave it to it's hard. Crowd work is hard because you gotta
definitely.
be real quick off the cuff. And not everyone is equipped to do that.
You gotta be quick off the cuff and also your stuff has to hit as soon as
Yeah.
it happens. So how did you get prepared to do stand-up? Like did you do any like small shows beforehand or was your special your first thing?
My special wasn't my first thing. I'd been performing. So I got my start when I was like in middle school. I watched a lot of, I listened to the stand up comedy radio station on Pandora. That was like my introduction to comedy. I would get like, a 5 minute joke from each comic and then it would switch to the next one. And of course, there'd be ads in the middle because I wasn't paying for premium. Uh, and I fell in love with it. I was like, this is amazing. This is incredible. And so then from there, I grew up in a super small town, like less than 5,000 people, significantly less than 5,000 people. And so
What was the name of the town?
my Alfred, New York, no one has ever heard of it. It has two colleges in it though, Alfred University and Alfred State. And my best friend in middle school, her dad was like the head of student affairs at Alfred University. Um, and so they had like a visiting comic coming. He was like, hey, I know you're interested in stand up. We need someone to open for this guy. Would you be willing to do that? I was like, absolutely. So my first ever set was 10 minutes opening for Ben Rosenfeld at Alfred University. And from there, like I would go into New York City whenever I could to try and do open mics and stuff, but it's like a 6 hour drive. So it's not like I could do that super often. New York's a big ass state.
Oh yeah,
Um,
definitely. I'm from California, big ass state too.
yeah, exactly. And so then I would do that. And then every year, so my first time I was 15, I was like 10th grade. And then 11th grade, I was opening for another visiting comic. And then my senior year, I opened for another visiting comic. And on that show, the dude who had booked me came up to me and was like, hey, would you want us to pay you to do like a full hour? And I was like, yeah, that would be great. I would love that. And he was like, cool, it's on Friday. And it was Sunday when he told me. And so I had less than a week to prepare. And I was a senior in high school at the time. And it was in November. So I was like, it was crunch time to apply for colleges. So
Right.
I didn't have any time to like actually prepare a set. I literally came up with my notebook that was just full of jokes. And I was like, I'm just going to tell these and have like a watch on my wrist. And once it hits an hour, I'm gonna walk off stage. And I was 17 years old, and it is the hardest I've ever bombed. That's the worst that I've ever done because I had done like enough shows at that point to know to ask about what the audience was going to be like, because I had gotten screwed over before with people being like, yeah, just like don't get political, but you can get super dirty if you want. And I'd be like, cool. And then I'd get there and the audience would be like over 50% under the age of 10. And I'm like, well, I prepared, you told me that I could get dirty. So like so for this set, I asked beforehand, I was like, I need to know, is the audience going to be like kids and their families? Is it going to be like drunk college students? Like, what's the vibe? And the guy was like, oh, it's Oktoberfest. That's what we're hiring you for. So it's going to be all drunk college students. And I was like, okay, perfect. And he was like, yeah, you can get as dirty as you want. I was like, great. I have an hour's worth of time. I'm not always like a dirty comic, but if I have an hour, I'm going to throw some stuff in there. Cause at that point I didn't have an hour's worth of like good material. And then I got there and no one had told me that it was a dry campus. You're not allowed to drink alcohol on it.
Oh, wow.
So, oh no, it gets worse. Not only was it a dry campus, it was outside and it was like, no, they didn't tell anyone that there was going to be a comedian there. And I was like one of 4 stations. They had like a pumpkin carving station over here, an apple cider station over here, a bouncy house over here, and then they had me in the corner. There was no stage. I was just on the ground. And they didn't even have chairs for people. So everyone watching was just sitting on the ground. Most of the people were just like walking through. And because there was no alcohol allowed and the activities were a bounce house, apple cider, and pumpkin carving, of course it was only children. And growing up in such a small town, it meant that it was my high school teacher's children. So I was trying to do my first ever hour. I had like 5 days to prepare, and my audience was my high school teachers and their children. And one of them came up to me after the show and was like, we're going to have a little talk at school about your material. We never had that talk. I think he was just trying to scare me, but it definitely worked.
So even though you bombed, because you got paid for it, did that make a difference for you? Did that let you know that that was a viable career path at that point?
Oh yeah. I like, that's, to this day, that is the worst show I have ever done. And in my head, I was like, I'm such a rock star right now. Like, I'm such a big shot. I got paid $200 to do 1 hour of work. Like, who else is going to get paid at those rates? That's crazy. Which in retrospect, I'm like, that's such a ripoff. That's crazy that I did a full hour for $200. Yeah, it was definitely not the best circumstances, but like I loved it because I had never gotten a chance to do anything even close to that long before. So that was like, I really thought like, I'm doing it. I'm making it.
Right. How was this to do? You said you did your thesis in front of your teachers and everything. Was that hard? And did you knew that was going to be the case beforehand?
Yeah, so I would have to bring my jokes I had a meeting like once every 2 weeks, and my committee was this one woman who's like a leading humor scholar, and this other guy who was a visual artist but had worked as an art director at Comedy Central like a decade and a half ago. So I was like, they kind of know what they're talking about. And so every 2 weeks I would show up with a Google Doc of like all the jokes that I had written and like the order that I wanted them to be in and stuff. And we would go and we would talk through the individual jokes and we would talk through the structure. And like, there were some that I would have to like defend my choices on like, why did I write it like this? And there were some like, the thing is that, okay, neither of them were comedians. And so there wasn't a whole lot of like, I think that you should write it like this. Like, I didn't get like a lot of suggestions on what I should do. But I did get a lot of critique about what they thought wasn't working. And then I kind of had to figure it out from there because I was the one who had experience doing comedy.
That's very much different, like that to be able to do that. So they're questioning you, but not like, it's like a more of a challenge, just wanted to know your thought process behind it.
Yeah, kind of. Is usually as long as I was able to explain myself, I was able to like continue doing what I wanted. And there were a couple things where they would be like, oh, we think that you shouldn't do this, or we don't like this joke, or you think that we should edit this one out. And I would have to be like, no, actually, I I know what I'm doing here, and I trust my own judgment, and there's a reason that I wrote this in.
So have you ever rethought a joke before? Like, like something that you wrote and then you look at it and it's like, I don't think I want to do this.
Oh my God, constantly. That's so much of like, it's really hard to write comedy in a vacuum. And I think you see this a lot, like if you're going to an open mic, you can always tell when it's someone's first time because their stuff is really like meticulously written, right? As all one thing. It's usually one story and it's 5 minutes long. And it's because like when you watch a stand-up special, that's kind of what you see them doing. And you think like, oh, it can't be that hard. But you don't realize that like most of comedy is trial and error. And like if you see someone telling a joke on like in like a stand-up special, like on something that's like been published, odds are they've told most of those jokes in front of people like 50 to 100 times.
Definitely.
Yeah. And so I think that like so much of my process is like I take it out to open mics first and I see how it does and I tweak it and I'm like, this part's not working as well as I thought it would. This part's working better than I thought it would. There's a lot of times when I'm really surprised where people will laugh and I'm like, that's not actually the funny part. Like I didn't think anyone was going to laugh at that. And so like it goes from taking it to open mics to then like, oh, I'll take it to like a bar show. And then like, oh, from there, I'll take it to clubs maybe. And then if it does well, it'll be something that I publish or I post it on TikTok. That's a pretty good way to tell if people like it or not.
That's the thing about a lot of people don't understand that it's a process to get this to see if it works because you got to practice in the mirror. Then you have to practice in front of other people because you don't know people's genuine reaction until you get it.
Yeah,
you could think this is gonna hit, and then as soon as somebody get that quiet crowd, it's just like, oh shit, on to the next one.
Yep. And nothing will tell you that your jokes suck quicker than doing it in front of a crowd that isn't like on your side going into it. Like I'm never one to like blame the crowd, but I do think sometimes you go in and you're like, this is a tough room. And then there are sometimes like when I'm filming my special, like those people all got tickets specifically to be there to see me. So like,
oh wow,
my jokes kind of could have sucked. And like, I probably would have been able to get a good reaction out of the crowd because they were already on my side coming into it. But like when I go to like a random club show, no one is there because they wanted to see me specifically. They just wanted to see comedy. And so like, that's a much more difficult audience. And I think that's like the real test of whether or not your jokes stand up or whether you're just likable.
Right. So for you, what's worse, the booing crowd or the silent one? Because for me, doing like I do music as well, and I sing, I rap, and I do battle rap, like I said. So for me, it's the quietness. Like if I do get a reaction out of you, I might have wanted that. If you say boo, I might have hit a nerve, but I'll still get a reaction out of you. But for me, if you're quiet, it's just like.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I could not agree more. When people boo, I'm like, I'm doing something. Like I got a reaction somehow. Right. But if people are quiet, I'm like, fuck, I didn't get anything. I didn't get anything from you. That's when I'm like, oh, that's crazy. Yeah, there is nothing worse than I was on a Zoom show a couple months ago. And someone must have been in like a really rural area because someone had actual audible crickets outside their window. Like real, like they weren't like doing a bit. And so I told a joke and no one laughed. And then I heard actual crickets and I was like, oh, okay. That's I see what you mean now.
Wow, that's crazy. So you're posting your things on TikTok. So you're obviously, you love stand-up, but in today's game, it's the social media game, and social media comedy people don't get is it doesn't translate into stand-up. It's two different lanes. So have you thought about transitioning to that side as well, or do you just want to be on the stand-up side?
That's such a good question, and one that I have been thinking about a lot because, like, as I said before, I started doing stand-up in 2015. December of 2015 was my first like show in front of people. And so I've always known that like I want to do stand up specifically. And then I took a class in college about like politics and social media. And this is so nerdy, but like I read a lot of papers, like academic papers, specifically about how the algorithm works, right? And I felt like I read through all this, and by the end of the semester, I was like, there's no way this is that difficult. As long as you like do the correct things for the algorithm, you kind of can't fail. And so I thought, well, I know that I want to do stand up out of college, right? But like I was in college in Western Massachusetts. There's not like a huge, robust comedy scene out there. And certainly not one that translates over to like doing stuff in a big area like New York City. And so I knew I wanted some kind of proof that like I had an appeal and that I was funny and that people liked me, so that I could show it to comedy club bookers. I could show it to like potential jobs and stuff to be like, I I'm not just saying that I'm funny, you know?
Right.
And so I was like, TikTok would be an easy way to do that. And
Right.
so I started in, it's like, I think I started consistently posting in like December of 2021.
Okay.
Oh, wait, no, sorry, January of 2021, December of 2020.
Okay.
And I was like, well, I was on my winter break from college. I was like, I'm going to post like every day, a couple times a day, do everything that I need to do for the algorithm. And if I hit a big enough number that I can join the creator fund by the time I'm back at college, this will be something that I consider to continue doing. But if not, I'll just give up and move on, whatever. And the day I moved back into school, I hit 10,000 followers, which is what you need to join the creator fund, or at least what you needed at that time. And then from there, it became every class I took in college stressed like, oh, you have to have a consistent creative practice as an artist, like to make sure that you have some sort of process that you stick to. And I didn't have that, and so TikTok became a way of like, I can stay creative by writing at least one joke every day, and then I put it out there, and there's like a very clear, concrete, number-based thing of like whether or not this is an okay concept, which is like how many likes does it get, how many shares does it get, how many views does it get. And from there, it was also like, it was the pandemic. There wasn't a ton of opportunities for me to be doing stand up in front of people. And Zoom open mics are useless because no one wants to unmute themselves to laugh. You know, like you're not going to get good feedback from doing something like
Definitely
that.
not.
And so that became my way of testing out jokes. I did it instead of open mics. And then from there, I really actually did start to like blow up a lot more than I had ever expected. And from that, like, TikTok has never been the end goal. I've never been like, I want to be a TikToker, right? I've always wanted to be a stand-up comedian. And for a while, TikTok was explicitly just a means to that end, in terms of like, if I can get this many followers, then I can get on club shows. And then from there, I can get, you know, people will see me and I'll get booked more and whatever. And now that I've been doing it for so long, like, it's definitely become its own thing. It's no longer just to get me to do stand up. Like, I do enjoy doing it now, but I want to be known as a stand up comedian who's on TikTok, not as a TikToker who happens to do stand up.
Right. And there's a big distinction between those two. Like I said, not everybody can do it. It doesn't translate. So would you consider doing like if somebody approached you to do skits or anything? Have you done anything like that?
I would love to, but I just have never been particularly good at it. And I also think that like I'm real lazy. And so the whole like, oh, putting a towel on my head to indicate that I'm a different character or something has never been something that like appealed to me at all. So I think that like it's probably something I should do, right, to prove that I have like range or whatever. But I just don't think of a lot of like sketch worthy ideas.
That's different. Like maybe somebody, what if somebody invited you and had something written for you, or you just add your flavor to it? Would you consider that?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Something totally different. So I want to kind of transition into your story a little bit. You said you grew up in a small town, and you're a little bit younger than me because you said you were listening to Pandora. I didn't have Pandora when I was growing up. So when you like you tell it somewhat in your story about how you were received at school, but it was different from when I was younger. You couldn't openly say that you were gay or you were anything like that. People were literally hiding behind bleachers and everything. Like for me, I didn't give a shit. Like be you, but the rest of my school was like, we're gonna beat you up if you.
Yeah, I definitely. So like, I have not always been like this, and especially not when I was doing comedy. And so like, I also, it's a real small town. The town itself was not super conservative, but the area that it was in, crazy conservative. Like whenever I drive home, as soon as you get like an hour outside the city, it's just Trump flags everywhere. And then you get the drive to my hometown. You have to go through this other town called Almond, like the nut. And when you're driving through, you will see people with literal full-blown shrines to Donald Trump on their front porch. Like that's not a joke. That's just how it is. And so like it was not a comfortable environment to be like a queer kid in. And so I wasn't out for my entire time in high school. I wasn't out. I mean, I certainly was not out as transgender, but I wasn't even out as being like queer. And stand up was really cool for me and important for me at that time because it was the only place that I felt that I could talk about being queer and have it be like safe. Because if people ever like gave me shit about it or asked me about it or pressed me on it or whatever, I could be like, I was joking. Like I was doing comedy that was clearly not serious. And so that was actually like the only outlet I really had to talk about any of that stuff. So that was really important to me at the time. But yeah, no, I was very much like a cisgender man while I was doing comedy out there. I a lot of my jokes were like, I think maybe I'm gay, but who knows? Ooh. God, I had this joke. I think about this all the time that I'm like, wow, I really said this out loud in front of people. And it, like 2.5 years before I came out, I would say me saying I'm gay at this point is less of a joke and more of an educated guess. And like, I don't know how I didn't figure it out earlier because of stuff like that. But then I got to college and I like tried joking about it, and people at college were like, that like straight people don't have thoughts like that, right? And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? And then I thought more about it and I was like, maybe they're right. So I came out as like bisexual in like Jesus, winter of 2018. And then from there, I was still at college and I was doing my whole like, oh, bisexual man thing. And then I started writing all of these jokes about like kind of being confused about my gender. And someone pointed out to me, like, didn't you used to do that with being queer? And that was kind of a moment I had where I was like, oh, I'm falling right back into the same pattern that I used to. And so it was a lot easier for me this time to be like, if I'm feeling the need to talk about it like this all the time, that probably means there's something more serious under the surface that I should actually address. And so,
do you feel like your comedy revealed yourself to you?
yeah, a little bit. I think they went hand in hand. I think that it's like a real chicken and the egg thing where it's like, clearly I was having these thoughts and these feelings before, which is why I felt the need to talk about them. But I was still real worried about it. So I didn't want to talk about them in any forum where people would take me too seriously and like put too much weight on what I was saying.
Right,
And then
right.
from there, the more I talked about it, the more comfortable I got with it. The more comfortable I got with it, the more I presented more feminine. And it just like, it really snowballed from there. And I think that I got sent home from college in like late March of 2020 for COVID, and I had to quarantine, and everything kind of stopped. Some of my classes were like, we're actually not even going to go online. This is just the end of the semester right now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so, because my professor was like, I have an 8-year-old child. Do you think that I can teach a full college course with an 8-year-old running around my house? This is not my priority.
Absolutely
and I was like,
not.
okay, I understand. So because everything stopped, like, it's real easy when you have a ton of shit going on to be like, I can't think about this right now. I have too much on my plate. I had nothing else that I could put in front of it anymore. And so I was like, I guess I kind of have to address this because it's the only thing that's on my mind 24/7. And so I really dipped my toes into it, where it was like, at first I was like, I'm just like a cis queer man who like paints his nails. And then it was like, he, they. And then it was like, they, he. And then it was like they, them. And it was they, them for like a while. And then it was like they, them, but I wear dresses and makeup all the time. And when people think I'm a boy, it makes me violently upset. Not like actual violent, but like I would get real bad about it. And so then from there, it was like they, she, and then it was like she, they, like I'm a trans girl, but you know, I was still holding on to something. And then I did the whole pipeline.
It was a journey during this time in your life. Were you doing research, or was it like a really internal thing?
I was doing research, but I also think that like there's no way to say this without it sounding dumb. Transitioning wasn't like a super intentional thing for me. I wasn't like going out like, oh, I'm transgender and I'm gonna do all this stuff to like whatever. It very much was like, I am just gonna keep doing what makes me the happiest and try not to think too hard about it. And so like firstly, it was like painting my nails. I had my nails painted. There was like a year where I didn't have my nails not painted for a single day. And I would like switch it out every week. I have like 20 different colors of nail polish that like I barely even use anymore. And then from there it was like, oh, well, I'll like experiment with women's clothes, or I'll experiment with jewelry. I'll get my ears pierced. And like everything, I just kept doing what made me happy until eventually I was like, I'm just doing everything that a woman does. And when people address me as a woman and treat me like a woman, that's what makes me the happiest. And so then from there, it was just like, you know, I just kept logically following the steps and following what made me happy until one day I was like, I guess this is me now, you know?
A lot of people don't realize everybody's journey is different. And that's why, you're people, I hate the thing, oh, you're confused. It's just like, well, if that's the case, everybody's confused because we don't know shit about ourselves until we figure it out.
Oh, no one knows.
Like when you're growing up, it's just like, do I like this? Do I like basketball? Oh, I really don't like basketball. Well, it's a journey. Life is a journey. You have to try things to learn if you actually, that's you.
Exactly.
That's the beautiful part about life.
It's all about trying shit out. And I never would have had, like, this works for some people. Some people will be presenting as a boy every day for their entire life and have this whole like internal struggle going on that they don't tell anyone about. And then one day they're like, I'm a girl, and they go completely the other way, right? And it's like all girl clothes all the time, everything, all like overnight. And if that works for you, that's great. But like, I never would have had the confidence to go straight from like 0 to 100. I never would have been able to go off the deep end because I wouldn't have known that that's what I wanted if I hadn't had all these opportunities to try it beforehand. And there's nothing wrong with going right into the deep end, but I think that that's also like, I think that everyone should experiment with their gender, because worst case scenario, right? You're like, oh, I actually liked what I was originally assigned at birth in the first place. And then like, that's amazing that you know you've explored it and now have more confidence that you're like, actually, this is what I am. And you have a better understanding of why that is.
I wish it was more acceptable for a man to do that, because you know, you hear a lot of stories about women. Oh, I experimented in college or whatever. And then as a man, especially as me being a black man, if I say anything like that, I am shunned instantly, because it's just like there's no separation from being bi or gay. You're gay. As
Yeah.
soon
Yeah.
as and
I
people don't,
totally get that.
it's like,
Well,
what's
I
the
wish,
difference
I
between
wish that we
doing
just,
that?
oh, sorry.
Go ahead, go ahead.
I just wish that people were given more opportunities to experiment just across the board. Cause like if straight people were more confident to experiment with like, ooh, maybe I'm not being straight, you would have so many more like good straight people. You know, like you'd have straight people who are like, you I feel like half the time when you talk to straight men about like, oh, why do you like women? They're just like, because women are hot. And I'm like, okay, right. But like, there's got to be more to it. And I feel like if everyone was allowed to experiment more, I feel like cis straight men would have a lot clearer reasoning for like why they like what they like. And that would benefit them because they would be able to communicate that better. That would benefit the women that date them because like they wouldn't have to help them work all this shit out. That would
Right.
benefit, it would benefit everyone if we were all just like allowed to experiment a little more.
I wish society would just take people out of boxes, because if you're masculine, you're supposed to be in this box. If you're feminine, you're supposed to be in this box. My daughter is a transgender woman, and she always says, well, women's supposed to act this way. I tell her, you're supposed to do what you want to do. How you feel is what you're supposed to do. How
Yep.
If you want to go outside and fix the washer, that is fine. That does not mean that you're any less of a woman because you decided you wanted to go fix the car, or you know, you wanted to go under there. That doesn't change who you are as a person. Is we put each other in boxes, and I think that's the biggest problem with society is people don't want to live outside of their box, because society said you're supposed to do this and this to survive, and that's not always the case.
Yeah, I agree. I had that a lot with football. I really like football. And that's not like a super traditionally feminine trait for me to be going buck fucking wild for Josh Allen. But like it's part of who I am. And my whole transition wasn't for other people. It was just me doing what made me happy. And like, so why would I give up? Why would I give up liking football if watching football makes me happy? Just because some jackass is like, it's not feminine. I'm also like, I'm not a straight woman either. You know what I mean? Like, do you have any idea how many lesbians I know who love football? That's just as part of it.
Right.
Yeah. And when the Bills are this good, how could you not like it?
Yeah, y'all looking like y'all might win the Super Bowl this year.
It's gonna happen. I mean, like, I'm trying not to jinx it, but every year for the past like 3 or 4 years, I've been like, this is gonna be our year. And then like, oh, last year, that bullshit overtime thing. If the rules, they changed the rule like right after that game happened. I'm like, if the rules had been better in the first place, we could have beaten the Rams. Are you kidding me? Anyways.
Uh, I was gonna ask something else about. Oh yeah. So are you into hip hop at all?
Yeah, a little bit for sure. I definitely have like when I was real little, when I was in like middle school, I got super into like NWA and Ice Cube. That
Okay,
was like
even
my
that.
introduction. And then from there, it was a lot of like, I had like a really big Childish Gambino phase when I was in like high school. And then I got to college and I listened to, oh, high school and college was like, I listened to so much Kendrick Lamar. I remember when Damn came out, I was visiting my grandma and she didn't have any cell service at her house. So I walked like a mile and a half to a nearby Starbucks so I could use their Wi-Fi and download the album and then walk back. And then in college, I got real into MF Doom.
Okay, so you're a real hip hop fan, and if you're into those artists, because a lot of people don't know about them. So there's a underground scene in Buffalo where these guys called from a Griseldas, Benny the Butcher, Comedy the Machine and West Side Gun, and there's such. It reminded me of that right now because you said the Bills, you know, they're like really big Bills fans, you know, and coming from where their neighborhood where they were from, they're to be able to perform there and be supportive of the team, and they're working with the team and everything like that. I thought it was a really dope story from, you know, being in the hood, selling drugs to football team, and y'all are giving back to the community.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely like I was like 2 hours south of Buffalo.
Okay.
So not like super close, but that whole area, like there is nothing good happening out there except for the Bills. So that's like everyone. You'll see all these signs that are like Josh Allen for mayor.
So I was just watching your comedy special like a few minutes ago, literally, and I was listening to the story about your mom having her own funeral. Was that true?
Yeah, that's true. My mom, yeah, she called it a funeral dress rehearsal. It was her 50th birthday. It was a whole thing. I wish that I was older when that had happened so that I could have like appreciated it more. Cause I just kind of I stayed for like the PowerPoint thing at the beginning. And then it became like a very much like adult, like drinking and dancing type of party. And my mom has she's made it so easy. Like if my mom, if not if, when my mom dies, it'll be so easy to plan her funeral because I know exactly what she wants. She literally has a playlist that she continues to add to this day of like the songs that she wants at her funeral. So I don't have to really do any of that work. And I left before all the fun stuff happened. Me and my friend got sent home because it was our bedtime.
That kind of takes the stigma away from death. A lot of people, I think, should be prepared for it. It's the inevitability of life that you're going to die one day. So it's best to plan. And I'm thankful that my mom passed in 2020, and she had pretty much everything written out that she wanted me to do. So it was just I just executed her plan, which made things easier for me. I still had to grieve and everything, but it wasn't like I was running around like, ooh, what do I do? How do I do? It was just I know what she wants. I'm going to do that. And that's it, you know?
Exactly. Oh, I grew up in a very death positive family. I know exactly where my parents' wills are and like what's on them and all that stuff. I even know how they want to die. I don't know if I can be involved in that, but like if they got their way, you know, I know the specific scenario. I think that like I had when I was born, all four of my grandparents were alive and one of my great grandparents. And so
wow,
like
that's a privilege.
yeah. And so I have memories with all of them. And I've been to, at this point, all but one of their funerals. I have one surviving grandparent.
Same.
And so like I part, funerals and that kind of thing were part of my growing up. I was never one of those people who like wasn't super familiar with death. And I also think that like when I was closeted, I had a really hard time seeing a future for myself. And so because of that, I had this, like when I was probably 18, I remember I was so shocked being a college freshman that no one else that I knew was incredibly prepared to die, like that it was something they were scared of. Because for me, it was like at best neutral and at worst like something that I maybe kind of wanted. And like since then, my life has definitely gotten a lot better and I'm like no longer in that place. But I still like residually from that, I have this feeling that I can't shake that like I think I'm gonna die kind of young. Not like anything's gonna happen. I feel like something random is like an air conditioner is gonna fall on my head or something crazy. And I don't
think that's the furthest thing from the truth.
yeah, I hope so too. It's not something I'm wishing for, but like I think that being in a shitty place mentally for so long made it that like I don't have a crazy big fear of death. It's something that I've always known is going to happen and something that like for a while I was perhaps too prepared for. So I'm not incredibly fazed by it. It's a part of life.
That is a great, I'm kind of coming to the realization more, getting more comfortable with it myself, because for a long time I had a fear of it, and it was crazy. I had a fear of it, but I was suicidal for a long time. Still deal with those thoughts sometimes where I'm like, I fear of it, but it's just like, I want to do it. It's like, something has to be wrong with me, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't
It's
want to
like
die,
these
but I want
shouldn't,
to die.
they shouldn't both be able to be there at the same time.
Not at all, right? It's just like, but I guess that's the human condition. So the other question I had was, are your parents supportive? And were they like aware of your journey as it was going on? Did you inform them, or did they kind of
Are
learn
we talking comedy or transition?
transition?
Transition.
Well, we can do both actually. So let's talk transition first.
Yes, my family is supportive. It has not always been super easy. Like, and I also think that part of that is on me for not being the greatest communicator about it. I was so worried about how they were going to react to it that I kept a lot of stuff from them for a really long time. And I think like growing up, when I was in high school, I had this very clear image of like what everyone wanted from me. And so I tried very hard to be all of that. And I was a straight A student. I was on the honor roll. I was the captain of the track team. I was the president of the student body. I was like very much your, typical all-American, like boy child thing. And so because I like kept a lot of the stuff that I was feeling from pretty much everyone in order to like maintain this image that I thought everyone wanted from me, I think it made it a lot more jarring when I came out, because to them it was this thing that came way out of left field, whereas for me it was something that had been like on my mind for years and years and years. And so like things, they are supportive. It's I wasn't like kicked out of the house or kicked off the health insurance or any of that. But it hasn't always been super easy. It definitely wasn't like the smoothest transition.
Do you think that's more because of how you present it, or is that because of them and like learning and the curve?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think that like if I could go back in time, I definitely didn't make it super easy on myself the way that I handled things. And there's definitely like a lot that I would change. And I also think that like, you get any straight person past the age of 50, like they have some stuff that they haven't like thought super hard about yet, that comes up when their kid comes out as transgender. And so like I think that they did the best that they could. And I also think that like specifically my mother has been so incredible since then, because again it was kind of rough at the beginning, but since then like she bought all these books about transgender people, and she started going to these PFLAG meetings and talking to her friends who were also parents of transgender children, and she really like so visibly, clearly, explicitly put in a ton of work to be like, I am trying and I am doing my best to understand and be as supportive as I can be and all that. And it shows when you interact with her.
Which is a great thing. A lot of people
Yeah.
don't have that same thing,
Right. And I think that like no one is going to be 100% perfect all of the time. And you can't ask people for that. All you can ask for people is that they try their best. And there is no doubt in my mind that my mother has tried her absolute hardest. So even if there are times that she like still screws up, which like everyone does, I screw up all the time.
Right.
I always know that she's trying really hard and does have my best interests at heart. And that's made things a lot easier, is being able to like see that she's doing the work to have that progress.
That is the most important thing. Are your intentions in the right place, and are you trying to learn? Because I know it's not easy to to learn this, but you know, if you love somebody, you will learn it. And after a while, it's you embrace who they are now. So
Yeah. And it wasn't easy for me either. Like I had a lot of learning to do as well, just in terms of like how to communicate that type of thing. And like I really was pretty hard line when I came out in terms of like, you have to get my name and my pronouns right all the time, or else I will blow the fuck up. And I think that in retrospect was like really counterproductive in terms of like, this is a big shift for them. And I'm not saying that like I needed to forgive them for everything all the time, but I also think that like I could have perhaps been a little more patient.
yeah, it's difficult for someone, especially who has referred to you as he or him for the whole life, to it's just a natural thing that comes out. And then, you know, to try to challenge that within yourself, it's the person has to want to do the work, first of all.
Yep.
Because if you want to just, because I have a lot of people, well, my daughter has a lot of people in her life that wanted to call her he and him before. And I'm like, you know, just try to learn. So I'm always like, I check myself constantly with that. Like, you know, it's not that hard to refer to someone how they want to be referred to. At the end of the day, it doesn't take anything away from you or your belief system to call them what they want to be called. It's just like someone who wants to legally change their name to something else. Like that's the call them what they want to be called.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And my mom, this is the funniest thing. My mom changed her name. Not when I transitioned, like before my time. She didn't change it legally ever, but like the name that I knew her as was not the name that like I knew what her legal first name is, but no one ever called her that growing up. She was always Chase. And I had this moment where over the summer I met one of my mom's friends from college, and we had a conversation where her friend was like, oh, and I remember your mom came back one year and was like, everyone has to start calling me Chase, and she would correct us all the time if we got her name wrong and all this stuff. And I was like, so you do get it. And it was one of those really nice, like,
that's
I don't know, sometimes because like I grew up when I was living with my parents, it was always like, you know, as a boy, there was a while where I felt like, oh, like I didn't really get to have those like mother-daughter moments. And that was one of those times where I was like, oh, we are a lot more similar than either of us would like to admit.
That's a beautiful thing to learn it that way. So another question I have for you is, have you faced any discrimination?
Yeah. I mean, like not like a ton. I think that I have faced your normal amount of discrimination. I think that like it's also a distinction of like I'm like highly visible on the internet, right? And so that comes with a lot of ups and downs. A lot of the downs of that is like I have experienced a ton of like harassment and stuff over the internet. And I remember last summer I posted a clip where I had gotten acrylics, and these two just happened to fall off first. And so I posted some joke on TikTok where I was like, oh, trans women can't be lesbians. Look at my hands and tell me that I'm not a lesbian because my, middle and index finger had really short nails. And I like started like nothing really happened with that video. And then like a week later, I started getting all of these comments on it in Russian and Spanish. And I was like, that doesn't normally happen. And I in no way claim to be fluent in Spanish, but I took a lot of Spanish when I was in high school. So I knew enough to get the general gist of what they were saying. And it was not like super kind. And so I was like, that's so weird. Why am I suddenly getting all these comments from people in other countries? And then like a week later, I got a DM from an account on Twitter that I did not follow that was like, hey, I hope you're doing well. I just wanted you to know that there's this account that's been using your image without giving you any credit. And I was like, okay, what is this? And so I looked at it, and by the time I found it, It had over 200,000 likes and over 60,000 different retweets, which is the most viral anything of mine has ever gone on Twitter, which is annoying. And it was somebody who was really transphobic being like, oh, like, look at this creature saying she's a lesbian or something like that. And there were tens of thousands of comments of people just saying the nastiest shit about me. And I didn't read through them because like I read through like 3 and I was like, I know what this is going to be. And it's not going to be good for me to read through the rest of it. And so I stopped, but like that'll occasionally happen again. And like, or like I'll have people, I had to stop going live on TikTok because every time I would go live, I would get thousands of people being like, if you ever tried to use the bathroom with my wife or my daughter, I would shoot you on sight and stuff like that. And it really like made it harder for me to like, it made it scarier to like go outside and stuff like that, knowing that people thought that.
Oh, there's a big sect of people now who are just bold in their sexism and racism, and
yeah.
I think Trump has emboldened people to be comfortable with being openly, like, you know, before when I was growing up, you know, you kind of racist in the closet, you're sexist in the closet, you know, but now it's, oh, I'm racist out in the open now, which
yeah, it's so crazy. And so like I have definitely experienced a ton of shit on the internet. In person, less, much less. It's not nothing, but it is still less. When I came out, you know, I'd seen so many horror stories about like what it's like to be transgender that I was kind of expecting to just like get harassed on the street all the time. And for the most part, people do not give a shit. And that's like real nice. And I've definitely had some stuff like, if anything, what I have to deal with the most now are like people who think that because they're such an ally, they can get away with shit that they can't get away with. Like I had someone say to me, okay, there's a joke in my special where I say the word faggot and I say the word tranny. And somebody asked me, they were like, are you sure that you can say the word faggot because you are a queer woman, not a queer man? And she said it while she was talking. And I was like,
like verbally, this is like in person?
Yeah, it was over Zoom.
Oh shit.
And I was racking my brain, like, how do I explain to this woman that I can say? And before I could finish, she was like, you know, where I used to live, and it was a conservative area, people would see you and they'd be like, that's a tranny. And she pointed. And I was like,
dude,
what the fuck? Dude, I was so shocked. I had no idea what to say. I didn't say anything, actually. I was just like, yeah, because I like, how the fuck do you respond to that? And that's one of those things where I'm like, that woman is not transphobic, kind of. And like I know for a fact that she would be like, I'm such a great ally. And so that's the weirdest thing, is like people just treat me super differently now. And like, or like I was at an open mic a while ago. A comedian came on stage after me and was like, he was right after me. And he was like, oh, it was this big, old Italian man. And he was like, oh, I'm like the polar opposite of our last comedian. And then paused and then was like, oops, person. And I was like, you wouldn't have done that with anyone else. Like I don't mind being used for jokes. I think it's fun. That's part of being a comedian.
Right.
But like, if you had just ended it as at like, I'm the polar opposite of the last comedian, I would have been like, ha ha ha, that's great. Like, you're an old Italian man and I'm like a young transgender woman. Those are kind of different. Like, good joke. But the fact that he then like paused and was like so scared that I was like going to cancel him for saying comedian, for calling me a comedian, which is something that I am, that he like got so scared about it that he switched to calling me a bunch of gender neutral stuff, which I'm not. Like, that's the type of shit that annoys me. And so like, yes, do I occasionally get people saying mean shit, or like, do I get misgendered when I go to the dentist's office? Yeah. But like, has it changed stuff? For sure. Is it suddenly like, oh my God, I'm just like persecuted all the time and stuff is so hard? No, not at all. And I also think that a lot of that is because like I'm still white, you know. I'm like a white woman. No one gives white women that hard of a time unless you're like screaming for the manager. No one gives white women that much shit.
Really, yeah. I hate those old antiquated terms, you know, that we refer to people. Like, I actually had an experience one time when I was in this public place, and it was an older man and woman, and they were like, yeah, so yeah, you know, I used to go to school with somebody that was colored before, and I had to sit there and double take for a second, like, is that just because you're old? Or
yeah, I know. And then the worst part about that is you're like, is it worth my time to like address that?
Right.
Or do I just let that slide? And then when you do let it slide, every time I've let something like that slide, it comes back. Every time it just makes them like more bold. So then they'll say something else. And then I'm like, oh, fuck. Like, I should have just shut this down the first time so you knew it wasn't okay.
Exactly. So another question, I'm not keeping you too long, am I?
No, you're all good.
Okay. So the next question I have for you is, you mentioned Kendrick Lamar earlier, and have you heard his latest album?
Oh yeah. For sure.
So I want to ask you about Auntie Diaries, because I know that was very controversial in the media and how he addressed it. And to me, personally, I'm a big Kendrick fan. I've been listening to him since 2010. I think it was the correct way to handle it, because number one, hip hop is not to be censored. And then part two is like, it was obvious it was him learning in real time on the song. So it was like,
yeah.
It wasn't like, oh, I'm just gonna say this to get people on people's nerves. It was just like, no, I'm learning in real time. And even towards the end, okay, you could say it, but only if you let a white girl say nigga. And it's just like, oh shit, maybe I shouldn't do that.
Yeah. I really loved how, okay, to start this off, I do not have strong opinions on that song. I like remember reading when it came out, like reading stuff from like some people being like, this is not okay, and some people being like, it is okay. And I was like, it's a pretty okay song. Like, I don't really care that much, to be honest. And I thought that like it was very much telling a story, you know, and like the story, the arc of the story was very clear in terms of like it was something that he did not get, and this is like how he was like working through it as he grew up, and now like this is where he is now, and like all of that. I was like, that's a good story and a compelling story, and it's not like he was saying all this shit and then his like the end of the song was like, and I hate trans people. Like that was not the message at all, you know. So I think like it had a great message for sure. And I thought the song was like, I don't know, it was just not my favorite song on the album. And so I thought like, yeah, it was, I don't particularly listen to it all that often because I just thought it was like, yeah, it was good, but it wasn't like great. And I also think that like there were a lot of people that I saw talking about how like it was specific to how like transness is viewed in the Black community, and that's not something that I have any kind of insight about. You know what I mean? And so I also was like, yeah, I don't know if this is something that like my opinion on that song was not going to be helpful to anyone. And I think that like in general with that song, my opinion is like it is fine. And that's about all that I've thought about it. Like I think the message was good and the execution of that message was like, I'm not okay. When I say the word questionable, I'm not saying questionable like in a negative way. I'm saying questionable as in like I understand why people have questions about it.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so like that's something that like I would like to hear him talk more about, because I also have questions,
Right,
not like
right.
bad questions, but just like I want to know more about his process for how he came up with that and like why he chose to do that. And I also think it was effective. It got people talking about exactly what he wanted them to be talking about. And so like, yeah, I really don't mind.
I love the song narratively and everything, but personally, my two favorite songs off the album were Savior and Mother I Sober. Where
Oh, let me I don't know the names off the top of my head, but I definitely had some songs that I enjoyed much more than others from that album. Um oh yeah, I really liked N95,
oh yeah, me too.
and I really liked We Cry Together.
Me too. Have
Yeah,
you seen the video that came out for that?
I haven't, not yet.
It is beautiful, and I like the way he went into it. It's more like him acting. He's still like rapping, and the music is still there, but the music is toned down a little bit to where it's like a scene from a movie. So it's
Yeah,
like
that's how I felt about that song. Is that like it was I liked the music of it, but I also was like it painted such a vivid, clear scene that like I felt like I was in the like I knew exactly what was happening in that song.
exactly, and that's I think that's what made that song so powerful because it like I felt uncomfortable listening to it. It's like because I've
Yeah,
witnessed things like that happen before, and it's like it's like that couple arguing. It's just like they're right in front of you. It's like, oh man, I think I'm gonna leave.
yeah. This has been living in New York. This has happened to me a lot where I'll hear couples arguing in a language that I don't understand, but from their tone, I know which one of them is right. I'm like, listen, I don't know what you're talking about, but I can tell that the guy's being an asshole right now.
right, right. Uh, the next thing I want to get into is the Dave Chappelle.
Mhm.
You know, he was getting a lot of shit for his the way that he talked about his trans friend in his special, and I'm like, for me, I'm like, it's subjective. I understand why people could be offended, but at the same time, it's Dave Chappelle, and he's always done shit like that. So it's just like, what did you expect from him? I mean, so what was your thoughts on it?
I really did not like the closer, but perhaps not for the reason that you would think. I think the main reason that I didn't like it is that I thought that the jokes weren't very good. And I was like, the main reason I didn't like it is because I was disappointed because I fucking loved Dave Chappelle. I love Dave Chappelle. I thought his jokes were not only so like tight from like a writing perspective, but also like he always had such a clear message and such a clear intention behind what he wanted to say. And so like and it was always kind of like cutting edge, you know? Like the Chappelle show was a little shocking to a lot of people
Oh
when it
yeah,
came out. And like and so the fact that he went from being so cutting edge and having such well-crafted jokes to doing something that was like not only a little regressive, but also, in my opinion, super sloppy, was just really disappointing for me. Like when he used, okay, space Jews as a punchline, I give it like a C minus. And he used it like 4 times in the special. And so I was just like, that's not something that I would give that much time.
and that's a
And then
different
like,
perspective too, especially since you're a comedian as well. That you could visualize. Okay, you could have written that so much better and
yeah,
so much
yeah.
more thought into it.
And like, okay, as like a transgender person, was it at points tough to watch? For sure. And I definitely think that like, but the hardest thing for me wasn't even what he said. It was that he had this giant theater full of people where like, okay, I have a specific example for this. A lot of Dave Chappelle's jokes, other comedians in general, but specifically in this special, he did this a lot. He would start by like the setup made it look like it was going somewhere horrible. And then he subverts your expectations at the end, where it's like the punchline is like, but it wasn't actually that bad. I can't believe you guys thought this about me, you know, like that kind of thing.
Right.
And he had a joke where the setup, where it was like making him look bad, he said, I'm transphobic. And there was clearly a punchline coming after that was like going to be like, obviously not, you know, like subverting our expectations from there. But when he said I'm transphobic, before he even got to the funny part, the whole theater cheered. And that was the moment that was really hard for me, because I was like, that's not even the funny part. You know what I mean? That's the setup. And so, like, hearing someone just say I'm transphobic and have a room full of hundreds of people cheer and applaud, that was tough to hear. That was real tough to hear. Because that wasn't the funny part of the joke. That wasn't where the joke was going. That wasn't even the general message of what he was trying to say. And so Dave Chappelle, when he walked away from the Chappelle show, it was because he was worried about the way his jokes were being received, specifically by white people. And there's like that story about the pixie sketch. He did all these sketches about like a racial pixie, where it would like, it had the, you know, like a person had like basically like a devil and an angel on their shoulder.
I remember.
And one of them would say to do like super stereotypically racialized things. And he had that joke, and when he was doing it, there was a white guy in the front row that laughed really hard at that joke, and he could tell that he was laughing for the wrong reasons. That he was laughing because he was like, ha ha ha, Black people do that kind of thing, you know, not like, oh, it's funny that they have this, whatever. And because he was like, maybe my stuff isn't being received the way that I want it, that's why he stepped away. And as a comedian myself, I've had those moments where I'll say a joke that's like about specifically a trans thing, and I'll have an audience mostly of not trans people, and they'll laugh really hard. And I can tell by the way that they're laughing that it's for the wrong reason. And so it's something you can clearly get like a feel for as you're doing it. And he's been doing it a lot longer than I have. And so it's disappointing to me that it seems like he can no longer feel that people are laughing for the wrong reasons. And so when I watched The Closer, that's what I felt like the whole time, is that like, you know, you can debate all you want about whether or not Dave Chappelle is actually transphobic, or if he was just doing it to be funny or whatever, right? But what you can't debate is how the audience received it. And watching that special, I know, I could feel it in my fucking bones that they weren't laughing because they were like, oh, it's so funny that Dave Chappelle, you know, is pretending he's transphobic, but he isn't, or whatever. They were laughing because they were like, it's funny to shit on trans people. And that's where it really, those are the issues that I had with it. And like, I didn't think it was a good special. I'm not going to pretend to like it, but I also am not going to pretend like I never liked Dave Chappelle, or that Dave Chappelle never had anything like valid to say. He was the fucking king of comedy for a reason. He did some real incredible cutting edge work, especially at the beginning of his career. And it's really sad and disappointing to see that he's fallen so far from grace.
Yeah, I feel like that was his weakest special ever.
Ever. Oh my God.
And I feel like he's still capable of doing something good. So I know he renewed a contract with Netflix, but I think at a certain point he did what he said he wouldn't do, which was do something for the money. You know, like, I kind of feel like he got that $60 million and was just like, well, fuck it. I'm just gonna I'm gonna phone it in real quick, and you guys are gonna like it anyway because, you know, you paid for me to be on here. So
yeah. And I hope that he can come back with a funnier special. And I hope that maybe it doesn't have anything to do with me this time. But like, I'm really worried that like comedy, you know how people say like tragedy plus time equals comedy? Okay. I think that it's comedy plus time equals tragedy. No comedy ever ages well. It's just part of the medium. And because of that, like, comedians have, for the most part, an expiration date on them. And I think that like a lot of people try and fight that as they get older, and it's never a good look. And so I think that like with Dave Chappelle, I'm really worried that because he had a bad reaction to his special, like as a comedian, when the audience reacts poorly, your reaction to that should be, I didn't do a great job. And like, I'm going to rework what I'm doing and rethink things and come back and do better. When you've gotten as big as Dave Chappelle is, I think that your ego gets to a point where you can no longer take that feedback and you think not, oh, the audience received this poorly, maybe I'm doing something wrong. And you think I'm the fucking king. The audience received this poorly because they suck and I know what's funny and I get it. And I'm worried. And I don't think for no reason, to be honest. I think this is a trend that we see with a lot of comedians that like he's going to take this in a direction where he doubles down and is like, if he does some special about how much he hates cancel culture, I'm gonna lose all faith.
That is the
in him.
wrong approach. That is totally the wrong approach. I think
it's tired. So many fucking people have done that, and it's been stale for so long. So much of comedy is about trying to stay on the cutting edge, and I just think it seems like he's gotten older and has maybe gotten a little bit behind the ball. And I hope that he can take this as a reality check and get back to being on the cutting edge, because I'm sure he still has some cool stuff to say and interesting stuff to say. And if he does, I'll listen. But I have a sneaking suspicion that he's going to double down and it's just going to get worse.
We'll see, because he has specials coming out soon, and I have a feeling that he might, but it all depends on how much respect that you still have for the comedy game. Do you still respect it enough to take that on the chin and be like, okay, I messed up here and come back? Because Kevin Hart did. That's what I heard, isn't it? Because his last special before this, the one that he's doing now, I heard was, I watched it, was bad. I didn't like it at all. But I heard that he came back and he learned a lot, and he's back on, he's funny again. Like, so you got to learn from it. So it just depends if he's really that guy still. So we'll see.
Everyone, no one can be perfect 100% of the time. But what really separates it from me is whether you can kind of take an L and sit back and be like, okay, I have to rethink things, or whether you're like, it's everyone else's fault and you just try to bust your head up against a brick wall.
Well, I like to end on a lighter note. So let's go with your top 5 comedians and the top 5 specials that you've seen.
Okay. So if we're talking all time, top 5. Okay. I think I still have to give John Mulaney my number 1. He's been my boy for so long. I can't let go of that. Mike Birbiglia is currently my number 2. Hannibal Buress, he was my number 3 for a long time. Maybe he's like 4 or 5 now because his most recent specials were not good. But his early Animal Furnace and My Name is Hannibal are fucking perfect. Those are so good. Number 4. Okay, if we're talking like specials, then if we're talking comedians of all time, I probably wouldn't include Hannah Gadsby. But if we're talking specials, I would put Nanette up there. If we're talking comedians of all time, who else do I think for 4 and 5? Okay, she's like kind of on the come up right now, but Robin Tran, she's got some real fucking interesting
I saw her some of her stuff. She is hilarious.
Yeah. And I really like that she's taking she's getting real edgy with it. And I don't think you see that from a lot of like queer comedians. So I think that she has some real fucking cool shit to say. My number 5. Oh, this is so hard. Okay. This is probably going to come way out of left field for me, but I always liked Bill Burr when I was younger.
Really?
I think that his newer stuff has gotten a little too like old man yells at cloud kind of thing for me. But like his first couple specials, when I was like an angry little teenager, I loved Bill Burr.
That is fantastic. Where do you see yourself in the next like 5 years and 10 years? What is your ultimate goal with this comedy thing? You want to take it the distance, or is there like a point where you see yourself like, I'm going to retire around 45 or something? Are you going to be doing this for forever?
I'm gonna take it the distance as far as I can. I'm really hoping to set up a tour sometime within the next year, and like if I can make a living doing just comedy and not have a day job, I will do that in a fucking heartbeat. I am trying so hard to like make it, and I think that I have a lot of stuff to say that like there's not a ton of trans women doing stand up, and I also think that like not a ton of trans women are doing stand up with my like current style. So I think that I have a lot of stuff to offer, and I feels like I'm a part of something. Like for the first time ever, I feel like I have like peers that I'm really impressed by. And like I'm rubbing shoulders with people who are better than me and who I really respect. And I think that like I'm working really hard, and hopefully it only goes up from here.
That is so awesome. I really appreciate you coming on. I look forward to hopefully having you on again in the future, and hopefully that we can work together, because I want to have a creative space where people can all feel free to use their talents. Because like I said, I sing, I rap, I also act, I write poetry, and I want to be able to incorporate things together, because I've never seen like that many music shows and a comedy show together or something like that. So I would love to put something like that together. People can just feel free to, it's a creative space, and people will like will just love the vibe and everything like that. So I really appreciate you coming on. It's been a pleasure.
Hey man, thanks for having me.
All right, guys. I love you guys. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Peace.
Grind. They say it ain't no hope, so I gotta grind. The streets ain't no joke, so I gotta grind. I don't know how to cope, so I gotta grind. Out scrambling for a bill, panhandling for a meal. Street savages with the steel, out canvassing for a kill. 18 years old, with no fears or goals. Switch gears, I'm cold, I'm sincere and bold. God stand down, really tripping. Ask God, will he really listen? Started shaking, now I'm really twitching. Bleeding was one of my many symptoms. Help.